I want to touch on a couple things related to relationships. Maybe three things that are kind of on my mind. You know, I have the experience of having relationships that haven't worked out for me. And I have the experience of relationships which maybe I wanted them to work out to be more than what they ultimately wound up being. And I think a lot of us are in this boat. We have both of these experiences, you know, like on one hand, a marriage that doesn't work out. Like that's a super real example. Another case, a woman who's been a crush, a good friend for a long, long time, who I wanted to have a meaningful relationship with, but it just never really materialized. So just kind of drawing off of those two things, there's really three big takeaways that I wanted to take some time to talk about and unpack. The first one of those things is the importance of genuinely caring about other people. It's been said famously that people will forget what you do and they will forget what you say, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And that's true in any relationship, whether it's a serious romantic relationship or if it's a hypothetical relationship where you just have maybe somebody who you would like to have a closer relationship with. And it's really important to always remember to do everything you do from a place of true respect. And true respect doesn't have a demand. It doesn't say, you have to do this, you have to give me what I want, and if you don't give me what I want, then I'm not going to love you. And there's a lot of that in relationships where people will basically do that. It'll be, you know, I love you if I'm getting my way. But the minute things don't go the way I want them to, then now I'm going to do a total turnaround, and I'm going to say I don't love you at all because you didn't give me what I want. So you've got to understand that love is a gift you give. And it's also, by being a gift, it's something that can be rejected. You can't force somebody to take a gift. And if you do, it's not really a gift any more than if I burst into your house and I brought you a cake and I said, I'm going to hold you at gunpoint and I'm going to force you to eat this cake that I made for you. That wouldn't be a good experience. So by the same measure, it's very important to always remember that. Think about what place you're coming from anytime you have any kind of relationship, whether it's a romantic one or not. Are you coming from a place of genuinely caring and understanding that if things don't go the way you want them to go, you still will cherish and love a person for who they are? That's very important. Next, though, I wanted to talk about how sometimes when something doesn't work out relationship-wise, you can blame yourself for things that aren't really your fault. And you can say, well, you know, did I do something wrong? And first of all, to that, I would say, yes, you did, because every single one of us has the opportunity to influence others in a positive way. And you can't ever 100% say things wouldn't have been different if you didn't do things different. Just like if you had a hurricane that came through your town and it demolished your house, you could still go back and say, well, maybe if I secured my home in a different way, maybe if I would have put better security measures in place or something, maybe it would have worked out better and I wouldn't have had so much of a loss. You can always look back and say, well, there's a few things I could have done better. But that doesn't change the fact a hurricane was coming through your town and you didn't make that hurricane. Now, maybe you made a mistake just by deciding you were going to live in a place where hurricanes are likely to happen. Or maybe you made a mistake because you didn't get insurance. I don't know. But you didn't make the hurricane. You didn't steer it through your house. And so it's important to sometimes understand that while you share responsibility for an outcome, not the entirety of that is in your hands to control. And hindsight's always 20/20 anyway. So, like, for example, with my ex-wife, I'll think about this. I think, well, you know, maybe I wasn't caring enough.
Oh, nice.
Maybe I pushed her away. And I think sometimes that's true, I did, because there were things that she did that made me feel like I couldn't trust her. Things that made me feel like home was not a welcoming place anymore. And so I kind of just sort of shut down. I kind of just was to myself in my own little bubble, and I didn't really talk a lot, and I didn't communicate very well at that time. And then that exacerbated her feeling of not being loved or not being cared about. And that's where I kind of wanted to circle back to what I was saying earlier. If I was going to go back in time and say, well, what could I do differently? I would always go back to that whole notion of be very cautious to make sure that what you're doing comes from a place of truly caring. Don't hurt people because you feel hurt. Don't try to get people to do the right thing in a way that's controlling, that makes them maybe feel like they aren't cared about. And I think especially probably for guys, it's very easy to do this, where you want to be in control of a situation. You want to say, I'm going to make things be okay. Come hell or high water, I'm going to make this work. And then you're actually pushing people away because you're trying so hard to be in control that you're not actually caring about how other people feel. And so it's very important to remember that. People won't remember what you do or what you say, they'll remember how you make them feel. And so I think if I was going to be able to go back in time, I would try to be more sensitive to how my wife felt. Not just what I'm trying to do, not just my perspective on it, but how does she feel? Because it doesn't matter how much you think you are doing things that are proving you are loving because you're trying to take ownership of the situation. If you are sending micro messages that make someone feel unloved, then that's not good. But to go back to that very same illustration, you know, I look back at this, and the truth of the matter is, you know, one day my wife comes in and she says, I want a divorce. Well, you know, we didn't have a lot of assets between us. There wasn't really anything complicated. So, you know, I didn't really feel like I had a choice at that point. So I just went with it. You know, if that's what she wanted and that's what she said, then I just had no choice but to take it at face value. So I said, are you sure that's what you want? And she's like, yeah, I don't want to deal with you anymore. So I paid the guy at the law office down the street $1,000, and he wrote up the paperwork and she signed it. And then we were just divorced. That's all it was. I didn't even plan for it. I didn't really see it coming. And then one day it just did. And then a little while later, she had this other guy that she was getting married to, and she got pregnant and had a kid with him and moved off out of state with him. And all of this happened super quick. So the probability is that she found somebody else before we even really got a divorce. Or maybe she didn't, I don't know. But either way, the point I'm getting at is that, I took a long time to kind of sort of sort out these pieces and be alone and kind of talk to nobody and just be isolated, by myself after all of this. And my ex-wife already was married, found somebody else, and was moving on with her life before she even finished moving out of our apartment. So kind of to go back to that hurricane preparation example I was giving earlier, I can look back and I can say, well, there's some things I could have done differently that might have had a better impact on how our marriage would have turned out. I can take ownership of that. However, the truth is, I didn't move on for a long time. She moved on immediately. And that speaks volumes in terms of who demonstrated more fidelity in that relationship. And it's super easy to blame yourself for things when you really aren't the primary culprit. So yeah, I can take responsibility for things I could have done better. But ultimately, I'm not the person who initiated the separation. I'm not the person who moved on before the paint even dried. So, when you look at something and you say, well, is it my fault? Did I do something wrong? Am I the bad person here? You also have to look at it objectively and realize that sometimes you are the victim of another person's lack of willingness to commit, lack of willingness to put in the effort to work through something. And it does take two people to work through something. No matter how much effort you put in, if you don't have both parties willing to put in some effort, then at some point the house comes crumbling down.
What did you find?
Because you can't have a superstructure without a foundation. So don't blame yourself 100% when you aren't the primary perpetrator. There's a lot of people out there who will manipulate other people. They will do harm to other people. And then they will try to pretend that they are the victim. So, within reason, take your own side. Finally, I wanted to touch on how dangerous it is when there's people who want an option to be in your life, but they don't want any kind of commitment. They don't want to actually commit to anything, but they always want the option to kind of hang around. And so you think, well, I'm going to be there hoping that one day it's going to work out. And this is those almost relationships. It's those women in your life who maybe you care about them and they act like they care about you. They act like they care enough to string you along because they always want attention. They don't want commitment. They always want attention though. And
We've got this.
those are dangerous because they never deliver. they always have an excuse. They always have something that is the reason
I do believe
why
we're good at this.
they aren't going to be able to deliver right now. But they also have that little extra something that they kind of drop in to make you think that maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe the future will be better. And so you linger. And those are dangerous because they intoxicate you with this copium, with this hope that the future will be better, that the future will be different. And it's just enough to keep you from moving on. You don't move on. You don't open yourself to other opportunities, and time passes. And to a lot of people, you're just a game. You're disposable. And yet, from your perspective, maybe you hang on to that hope. And that's very dangerous, because it's not disappointment. It's not just rejection. Rejection is fine. Rejection is fine. If somebody just says, I am not interested, okay, well, then that's out of the way. You move on, right? But when somebody says, well, I just got to work through things, and, it's not you, it's me, and, they're genuine, just, every once in a while, not all the time, but genuine once in a while, enough that you feel like there's something there. So be careful. Be careful about people who string you along. Because there's a lot of people who will do that. They will be just genuine enough to keep you from ever facing the truth, which is that they are not ready or willing to commit. And if you're looking for healing in your life, if you're looking for a positive direction in your life, you can't fill your life with people who are liars, or people who make false promises, or people who always try to keep you in their loose orbit while never allowing you to get close enough for anything meaningful to develop. So you got to let go of those things. I mean, it's just that simple. If you're hanging on to something that promises but does not ever deliver, at some point you have to let it go. And you have to say, okay, I'm going to base my actions on the truth, not on my feelings. I think I said this in a video a couple days ago, but it bears repeating. A quote I saw online somewhere recently said, sometimes our mind knows the answer, but our heart doesn't want to listen. And that's so true sometimes. The truth is, it's time for us to surrender the things which are toxic and painful in our lives. To forgive ourselves, yes, learn from our past, but also forgive ourselves, forgive other people, and move on in a more positive direction. But that's hard. It's hard because it requires that we surrender things that we've held on to for a long time. It's hard because sometimes it means we have to allow there to be an empty space where we really would prefer not to have a void. It's important to understand how you could do things better in the future. It's important to forgive yourself and to also understand that sometimes you do nothing wrong and you are the victim of another person's personal demons. So really, those are the three things. Learning to move on from those relationships which always keep you in their orbit but never deliver. To understand that even though you could always do better, sometimes you're not in the wrong and you just need to be gentle with yourself. And finally, in all things, to always remember that whether you're right or wrong, you should always do what you do with the intent to do no harm, and to be mindful not just of your motives, but of how the way you treat others makes them feel. Life has loveliness to offer. Buy it, never count the cost. If you always treat people with a goal of being kind, and you never hang on to things which are false or untrue, and you always are willing to self-reflect and try to do better in the future while also not beating yourself up, I think that's a good recipe for maybe not everything, but at least a good recipe for starting to heal, for starting to move in the right direction, and for perhaps having more success in the future than you've had in the past. So, in closing, what do you think the biggest obstacles you've experienced have been in terms of interpersonal relationships? Maybe relationships that have caused you pain. What have you learned from them? And what have you learned about yourself? Love to hear your thoughts. In any case, as always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks for watching.